quick reminder to our viewers, we'll be watching tonight's presidential address and listening to what the president says tonight. But we're not going to take it live, as we've been discussing. That's because this president, sadly, has a history of misleading and in some cases simply false statements.
So it shouldn't come as much of a surprise that tonight CNN, ABC, and various different left-wing media outlets made the decision not to air President Trump's speech, and the reasons for that should be obvious. First and foremost, it would simply prove Trump to be right about everything. And yes, we do have banana republic style, heavily compromised elections in America. Yes, we need the Save America Act. Yes, the right-wing talking points are true. But of course, secondly, to air the speech would be an admission of defeat by the media. They basically have to hold themselves accountable because those that have memories longer than a goldfish, which I understand are sort of rare in politics, but still would probably have to remember that these people repeatedly parroted the slogan that 2020 was the most secure election in U.S. history, bashing anyone over the head who dared to suggest otherwise, oftentimes citing these very intelligence officials and experts for the credible position as to why. And now we have learned tonight, indeed, the intelligence officials knew that the election was basically compromised, right? This information coming from declassified government documents reviewed by every single intelligence chief going in. Yes, this was real stuff that was going on, but hey, most secure election, am I right? And of course, thirdly, maybe this is more speculative, but after all, if we did also learn tonight that the Chinese government was trying to bribe various different mainstream media figures to run negative headlines about Trump and deny the election skepticism, are we exactly to believe that after 2020, foreign adversaries just went away and foreign influence campaigns are not still influencing our politics to this very day? I'm just saying, but nonetheless, in today's video, I want to cover all of this. We'll talk about where CNN basically cuts the feed and saying we're not going to air this anymore, and as well as the mainstream media's sort of reaction post-speech, because that's arguably even funnier, where they're kind of like shuffling around to figure out how this doesn't prove anything or this is not credible, even though it is credible because, again, it's coming exactly from the intelligence agencies and declassified government documents that the media has told us we have to believe. So they're in this very like awkward position. We'll talk about all of it. First, though, do us a favor. If you enjoy our content, make sure you hit that like button down below, subscribe to the channel if you are new, share our video, do all of those things because let's just be completely honest. As you can see, there is a concerted effort to not talk about this or divert the conversation. And this is really an issue where, as we maybe did under the Biden presidency with issues like the border and things like that, the right wing has to be loud about this, right? The media is hoping it goes away. We cannot shut them up. We have to dominate the algorithms. We have to make sure it doesn't go away, right? They're going to do that. So share the video, do all that stuff. Anyways, so with that said, we did get the decision tonight, basically announced by CNN that they would be not airing the speech. Now, it's worth noting this came with sort of a week of back and forth by a lot of these media outlets because initially almost all of them came together and said they were going to air the speech. And then if you missed it this week, a bunch of leftists and Democrats were kind of forming the woke mob and calling for these networks to be canceled over that. Oh, how dare you? You better not air the speech. And in the end, at least a handful of networks did cave. It appears that maybe there were some mainstream media outlets, we can look at the record there, but that did end up airing it, but about half of them did not. And of course, the most publicly transparent one to refuse to do so was CNN, who had the following BS justification to give. Take a listen.
As a president who has an approval rating stuck in the 30s and who faces what appears to be losses in the midterms, and we'll see, because an election's an election, people get to vote. He has made it his mission to cast doubt on that upcoming election, right? That's what all those things add up to. And damage may already have been done. Repeatedly saying that America's elections are rigged and broken and dirty has eroded confidence in the bedrock of American democracy.
Quick reminder to our viewers, we'll be watching tonight's presidential address and listening to what the president says tonight. But we're not going to take it live, as we've been discussing. That's because this president, sadly, has a history of misleading and in some cases simply false statements on what we've been talking about tonight, election security and integrity. Also, the White House earlier today said he would be showing newly classified documents. So we want to make sure that we have time to review those documents, talk to experts about them, contextualize whatever he says or shows before airing it. But if there is news, we will bring it to you ASAP.
Oh, yeah, no, totally. I'm sure that's the reason why you're refusing to air the speech. It's not because you're going to be proven completely wrong and utterly humiliated on your own airwaves. It's just because you need time to review the documents, and we can totally trust you to summarize the speech accurately and tell us what's newsworthy and, believe us, we're going to fact check and verify everything. Yeah, give me a freaking break. Now, this probably brings back nostalgia for quite a few people because this was a tradition under Trump 1, and even when Trump would give a speech through the Biden years where they always did this. They always cut away and said, we're not going to air this because Trump lies and we need to fact check him because we're the media, which of course is completely ridiculous because first of all, you mean to tell me that Trump is the only politician who lies? Okay. Do they do that for literally anyone else? For example, Joe Biden. Remember his 2022 pre-midterm address he made where he talked about his opposition being a threat to democracy? Remember like the Star Wars empire lighting here going on or whatever that was? Was that interjected by constant fact checking, or did they say, we're not going to air it until afterwards where we can figure out, hey, what's true, what's not? But of course, this is kind of bringing back very vintage mainstream media behavior. It's this utterly like elitist, ridiculous act where apparently people cannot actually listen to what the speech says itself. They have to just hear the media interpretation of it. I think we can already point out and ascertain everything that's wrong with that. However, I do have to say on some level, it is kind of concerning to me what happened here, and I think this is something we have to be cautious about, is we haven't really seen the media do it this transparently in our faces like this. An old tradition, sure, but not for the past couple of years. And it's almost a reminder that we have to stay vigilant. Hey, peak woke, cancel culture, Trump derangement syndrome having institutional power, which it hasn't as of late. But let's remember, they used to be able to use this stuff to actively censor us, and they're kind of slowly hinting that they're going to bring it back. That's all on the doorstep if we do not immediately try to push back against it and do our best to win and stay cautious about all of these things, right? The fact that, for example, the woke mob, let's say on November 10th, 2024, had absolutely no power. Okay, no one was listening to them. Now, not even 100% of mainstream media listened to them, but about 50% did, right? And I'm not saying that the opinions of CNN matter, obviously, yeah, they're libtards, whatever, we get it. But I just want you to notice that maybe, again, it's not the end of the world. It's not like DEFCON 1 here or anything. But you notice how liberal-leaning institutions are kind of starting to get a little bit more transparent again about their libtardness. I'm not telling you that to freak out. It should be concerning, though, because it is to say, right, let's not forget, after 2024, even though it seemed like this honeymoon phase briefly where it was like the final victory and we had won and everything, we saved the world or whatever, right? These bad guys didn't go anywhere. If we start to see their behavior creeping back, that should be something of concern and, just something to pay attention to, right? This is behavior we've seen before, but it's been a while since they did it. The fact that they're bringing it back, again, not an emergency, but something we have to keep an eye on, okay, for sure. But anyway, so that's what they do. We're not going to air it because, blah, blah, blah. All right, now let's, of course, take a listen to, first of all, the reaction and the political pressure that networks that did choose to air the speech got from, let's say, elected Democrats and liberal-leaning government officials, because it's pretty transparent here. Take a listen.
I was embarrassed that the President of the United States went before our whole country and networks like yours carried this as news, as opposed to a rehash of falsehoods. And it is incumbent upon you and any responsible journalist to push back on these falsehoods. I've been either chairman or vice chairman of the Intelligence Committee for the last decade.
If I may, on that point, since you raised it.
If I may just finish, sir. If I may, sir, finish, sir.
Yeah, so there you heard Senator Mark Warner, an elected official of this country, mind you, going out and trying to pressure and shame media networks who, according to him, like you heard what he just said, how dare you as a news agency broadcast the words of the President of the United States as news? And if you're not basically doing what CNN did, is refuse to air the speech and then basically say, trust me, bro, the whole thing was a lie. It's not true. We're the real fact checkers. You can totally trust us, right? Basically, if you as a news agency actually do your job and report the news and show the world the relevant words of, again, this is the President of the United States, like it or not, Donald Trump is your president, right? Remember that? But, you know, we're going vintage. We're going old school on this one, right? He is your president, whether you like it or not, okay? But like, notice again, the Democrat pressure campaign, this is why I'm concerned. It wasn't 100% successful, and we understand we're dealing with inherently liberal-leaning institutions at their core, but you notice how they're starting to have the boldness to sort of like bring that back. And what is ultimately the point, right? Is the more they discredit us or call us fascist or dangerous to democracy or whatever, that of course allows them or gives them the moral credibility to, first of all, censor us, and then you know what happens next. That's where the jail or the straight up violence comes next, right? So they've done this whole thing before. We're watching this vicious cycle sort of start to repeat itself again. We have to stay vigilant so that we don't go down the same path again. That's all I'm saying about it, okay? A pretty bold thing to say, right? Now that we have Democrats like publicly coming out and trying to once again pressure the media, thinking they've won back a little bit of power in some ways. That's why it's our job in the midterms and 2028 to show them they were wrong about that. But anyways, so you have that, and then Trump gives his whole speech. We talked about that in our last video. Feel free to go listen for a full breakdown. But the reactions, of course, after the fact, where these people have been proven completely and utterly wrong. There are major bombshells that are pretty hard for the media to ignore. Well, let's take a listen, for example, on ABC, where this is, I kid you not, this is Jonathan Karl's reaction, okay? He immediately goes on TV to accuse President Trump of basically lying, even though he himself admitted, quote, he still has a lot more to look through in terms of the documents released right now by the government. So, in other words, what he's saying is, I didn't read it. I didn't look at the evidence, but trust me, President Trump is wrong about it. He's lying. Take a listen.
The president made some extraordinary allegations. I mean, he said that our election system, our security is catastrophically short. It dangerously exposed to hacking. When you have no trust, there is no greatness, and we can't trust our election systems. But looking through these documents, we have a lot more to look through. I don't see anything that comes anywhere near making that case. What I see is documents presented that are intended to raise doubts about our security, but nothing that suggests there is actually a security issue with our elections.
But hey, he has a lot more to look through, right, guys? The guy read page 1, okay? He read page 1 and found, hey, I don't see any evidence. See, Trump is clearly wrong, guys. It's actually so laughable. And hey, after all that happened is that the CIA admitted that election voting systems and machines, which you guys told us were the most secure in history, are blatantly not secure at all. They know these things are used to manipulate and steal elections. As a matter of fact, they can even be used in levels and on ways that cannot be detected after the fact via an audit. But no evidence of anything, really it's no big deal, right? It's all just doubts. It's all just like pure speculation. Hey, hundreds of thousands of non-citizens, by the way, in only 4 states we've investigated so far. Okay, so we still have the other 46 to go. In just 4 states, hundreds of thousands of non-citizens on the voting rolls, but illegals aren't voting, guys. Don't you know there's only like 10 cases of voter fraud per year? It's nothing. Totally, The Chinese influence campaign, the fact that they even were trying to figure out how to submit illegal ballots, there's no smoke there whatsoever. Yeah, completely, 100%. It's just our elections may be extremely insecure and vulnerable, and that's an admitted fact by our beloved intelligence agencies that the media says we're supposed to believe, right? But that doesn't mean we should do something about it. That doesn't mean we should do, apparently that's their argument, right? It's just freaking hilarious. Here's another one I like. So speaking specifically about the kind of like Chinese meddling aspect of the speech, this other analyst, Pierre Thomas from ABC, says, quote, "There's no evidence they were able to change the outcome of the votes." And that's the whole thing he stays, stuck on. No evidence that China actually manipulated a single vote. And as the White House here points out correctly, right, from the same people who brought you the Russia collusion hoax. These are the same people who spent 3, arguably 4 entire years talking about $45,000 worth of Facebook ads. This meddle, this altered the 2016 election, right? And then they falsely, completely false, it was a hoax from the start, right? They tried to accuse the Trump campaign of colluding with the Russians to get these $45,000 in Facebook ads. But, surely the Democrats, they would never collude with China. That's not a thing that happened. Okay. But still, regardless, those are the people this is coming from. The simple fact of the matter is that, of course, if this were a fair country, if we're dealing with objective standards here, I pointed out, first of all, when you actually consider not just the scandals around the election, but the way that the deep state covered it up, hid it from the president of the United States, like they literally knew our election was being manipulated, arguably stolen, and didn't tell anyone on purpose. To me, that is actually a Watergate level scandal. Okay, like that is actually like a bombshell, huge thing. Like one of the most important, generationally defining elections in American history. Look at the consequences, the ramifications we're still dealing with as a country to this day. And that went on, right? It was in a way stolen by the deep state. That is something that should be reported on that level. Like this is actually a scandal that should define the entire next 3 to 4 years of the media cycle in a just media environment. It should not just get the same levels of coverage as Russia collusion, but actually much significantly more. But of course, we fully understand that, we live in a completely 2-tiered system. And while we've gotten a lot of victories in the past couple of years, it's still not completely fair for us, right? We still have to win 10 times harder just to win at anything. But just something I'd like to point out. And, for a fact, the media is going to stop talking about this by the end of the week, right? It's not a story. It's not newsworthy, according to CNN. We'll keep you posted if anything's newsworthy. But we don't believe the fact that it's proven by our own intelligence agencies that actually the bureaucrats in those agencies tried to cover up the theft of the 2020 election. That's not newsworthy, guys. Utterly hilarious. Of course, you always get that moment where something accidentally slips. For example, tonight in their little reaction panel, CNN brought on this guy who's like a CEO of a tech company, something like that, AI company, right? And he sits on the advisory board of 2 quantum cybersecurity companies. And so this is what the media likes to constantly laud as an expert, right? Experts say, analysts say. Well, here we have analysts saying that electronic systems like the voting machines, for example, are more vulnerable than they ever been. Right. So they actually brought someone on who's the expert. And he's like, yeah, that's completely true. Absolutely. You can hack an electronic voting machine. Take a listen.
It is a different era now than it was in 18 or in 20. This massively different. I sit on the advisory board of 2 quantum cybersecurity companies. I know something about this. AI and the threat of hacking using modern AI technology has made all of our systems, both public and private, more vulnerable than they have ever been. We know, it's been proven both by our own intelligence agencies as well as the private sector, that China has been data farming, harvesting data, both public and private, from the United States, from U.S. citizens, data they cannot even access yet until their cyber techniques enable them to do so. It is a different threat today than it was in 2020 and 2018, and that's part of why the president was so forward-looking. We didn't hear the moaning and complaining and kvetching, if you will, to use a very New York term, about what happened in the past. This was raising alarms about what could happen in the future. The threat is different. The threat is very real.
Yes.
And that's a great point made at the end there, too, by the way, because while absolutely certain deep state actors absolutely need to go to jail for their cover-up and their actions in 2020, big picture here, it's not ultimately mainly about the past. It's about the future. And that's the thing. As much as the media wants to get hung up on maybe, oh, they didn't definitively, without a shadow of a doubt, prove that the 2020 election was stolen. Okay, fine. We're not just talking about the 2020 election. What I think is pretty indisputable, and like what Trump 100% did do, is line out all of the vulnerabilities and insecurities in our elections, basically did prove, arguably kind of gave the blueprint, honestly, on how a future election can be stolen. Here you have cybersecurity experts also pointing out, hey, hacking is easier than ever. All of these things put together, non-citizens on voting rules, like all of this stuff is literally happening, and we have established that it's happening. Notice how they're not even arguing that. The only like sort of like side distraction they go back to is, oh, the election wasn't stolen or something. Okay. But ultimately, what was this about? What was the ending point of Trump's speech? It's all about, this is why we want to pass the Save America Act. And what you guys really don't have an argument against anymore, you didn't really from the first place, but especially tonight, is a solid case. You know, you, again, argue all you want about 2020 or election denial, but looking forward, understanding the institutions that you worship so much, the experts, the intelligence officials, they've all identified without a shadow of a doubt these objective vulnerabilities in our elections. You have no rational case as to why those vulnerabilities should not be fixed, right? There's no actual case as to why we shouldn't pass the Save America Act if our elections have these many problems, other than, of course, why? Why? Drum roll, please. Big mystery, right? Why would Democrats want our elections to stay vulnerable and easily cheatable, stealable, hackable, all of those things? Why would the media likewise feel the same way? Well, I'll let you fill in the blank there, but we know the story. We know the story, okay? You know, we spoke before about literally criminal mafias of left-wing NGOs who are doing, at the very least, some of this ballot harvesting stuff, which was also mentioned in the speech. But you know, you put it all together and you wonder, who benefits? It's like actually a very useful thought exercise. So you might sit there on the surface and say, "Oh, Democrats are cheating in the elections. What a crazy take! You're a crazy person. You're a conspiracy." Okay, fine. But then let's kind of do a alternative thought exercise here, right? Who benefits from, because again, we've established the elections are not secure, okay? Again, that's what you can't dispute from tonight. Even if you think Biden wins 2020 anyway, even if you're that opinion, what you cannot deny after tonight is that our elections have massive vulnerabilities, okay? So if the elections are not secure, who benefits from the elections not being secure? Well, you would think the people who are likely benefiting, right? A to B here, are the people who are defending and trying to keep the elections inherently vulnerable and insecure. And then you can draw in the rest, right? Why? What is their interest in keeping the election insecure? You can let me know on that. But nonetheless, there you basically have it. These are a bunch of people who are kind of in this like desperate mode where they don't know fundamentally how to respond to this. So let me make a wild prediction. They're going to just stop talking about it. That's what they're going to do. By Thursday or so, we're just not going to hear about the speech anymore. The media is going to move on because, of course, the more this is mentioned, the more they have to give credibility to the idea, the more people might actually, I don't know, just like listen to the speech or something, which I encourage everyone to do, right? Don't even just listen to my coverage. Listen to Trump's actual speech. But that's also why I say, like, this is an issue kind of like the border in 2022. We can't allow them to sweep under the rug, right? We have to stay loud. We have to not shut up about it. Same way we did with the border or the mask mandates, the vaccine mandates, all of those things. That energy, hopefully right now, needs to be brought back to the right wing. It has to be reinfused. And like, we have to be those like rowdy, loud, almost annoying people of, hey, we're not going to shut up about this because it's important. Right? Don't let the media ignore this. You trust the media to do something, they're not going to do it. So you know how that goes. All right. Anyways, that said, let me know your thoughts. Be sure to leave a like on this video, subscribe to the channel if you are new. And until next time, God bless and peace.